honestly, Nathan, it's after the game. I think that Notre Dame has looked the most comfortable this year, which I think coming off the bye week's a really good thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned the bye week. I mean, there were certainly a lot of things, I think specifically with the offense, that, certainly, I mean, progressed, I guess.
Sure.
During the bye week. I mean, obviously the tempo was big from, the first series on. They got Lorenzo Styles Jr. involved, which I think was huge for them. Losing Joe Wilkins for the season, Lawrence Keys transferring out of the program. I mean, those were two depth guys that weren't necessarily going to be, big components of the offense, but certainly guys that, you were going to count on in certain situations. Obviously, Joe Wilkins had the touchdown in that opening game against Florida State, which is a big one. And then Lawrence Keys has had, moments here and there for Notre Dame, but getting Lorenzo Styles the ball, I think first and foremost was huge for Notre Dame. And then certainly the tempo, like we already mentioned,
yes.
With Jack Cohn specifically.
So I think the one thing that's really interesting about Cohn that I just thought of here, and maybe they mentioned this briefly on the broadcast, but Cohn has played a lot of football, which is great, but he hasn't played a lot of football for Notre Dame. So he's not learning how to play college football anymore. He knows how to do that, but he's still learning how to play for Tommy Rees. And Tommy Rees is still learning how to coach for Jack Cohn. And I think that's why we're starting to see nights like tonight where we finally found him look comfortable for really the first time since week 1 against Florida State. Everything was out quick, and I thought that was exactly what they needed to do offensively. The only time where he looked rushed was on that very slow developing screen pass, and it worked out perfectly, really.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I think we as fans and analysts have been kind of calling for the tempo or at least the quick game with Jack Cohn in there. And we saw that, I think, or at least to the biggest degree today. And it certainly looked like it worked in their favor. And I would imagine that this will be something that they stick with for the remainder of the season. And I should have mentioned this before, before we even got really started. Danny, you covered Wisconsin football for a little bit.
Correct.
And before Jack Cohn was the starter, but you still have a little bit of, maybe familiarity with him as a player and a person. So you can certainly provide some good intel that maybe others could not, just from both of his stops. And I think what you kind of hit the nail on the head is, he's played a lot of football in his days, but at the same time, he hasn't necessarily played for Tommy Rees, hasn't played in this kind of specific style of offense.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame's not the most explosive offense like an Alabama, Ohio State, teams that just tend to score on 4 or 5 plays, at will. But there's certainly a more explosive offense than what he was running at Wisconsin.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There are not very many offenses that are less explosive than what Cohn was running with the Badgers. And part of the time he was there, and it's great that he gets to play with Kyron Williams now, but he did get to play with a better running back at Wisconsin than Jonathan Taylor. Like, I have no doubt about that. So that's kind of where the similarity is that they played with great running backs, but there wasn't a Kevin Austin at Wisconsin. Jake Ferguson's a really nice tight end, but he's not Michael Mayer. And Danny Davis is a fine wide receiver, and Kendrick Pryor and those guys are all fine, but they just don't have the skill position guys from top to bottom outside of Jonathan Taylor that Cohn has at Notre Dame now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one guy you probably failed to mention there was Quintez Cephas, who's probably the best receiver that's come out of there in a while.
But he essentially missed a whole year when Cohn was there because he was dealing with an off the field issue that he basically was cost a year of football. So he didn't have that time Cohn didn't have that much time with him.
Yeah, certainly a fair point. Another thing, and this was something I was sort of preaching, at least in my podcast, the Golden Homers podcast, earlier this week, was the idea that it was pretty much guaranteed that Cohn was going to start this game, at least based on the way the coaches were talking, the way the depth chart was set up, so on and so forth. And with that, the idea that Buckner could come in and sort of be a change of pace guy. And when he does come in, he maybe gets a little bit more of, the offense thrown his way instead of it just being Jack Cohn has struggled for a couple series, or the offense has struggled under Jack Cohn for a couple series, and now we're going to go to Buckner or Pine full time. And I think what we saw today was exactly how we want this offense to be utilized with both guys. Jack Cohn's going to be the better natural thrower at this point in his career.
Sure.
If you run the tempo and you give him time to throw the football, he's going to make some plays for you. And then when Buckner comes in, he can stretch the field not only with his ability to run the RPO, or at least put the defense in different situations, but he can also throw the ball down the field, and he showed that a few times today as well. So I thought it was a perfect game plan overall from Tommy Rees. And then obviously the players, I think, ran it, maybe not to perfection, but certainly better than I think that they have been running it all year.